Hi guys! Today we are going to be talking about Penrith in Queenstown, and this is going to be part 1 of our series. Along the Queenstown MRT station, right, there are a couple of condos actually facing this MRT track. So I'm curious whether does the MRT track facing make a difference in terms of the performance? Because when the train drives by, it's going to be very noisy, right? If you're familiar in that area, actually only Sterling Residences is the only condo that does not directly face the MRT, and it also happens to be a big project. So is it really because Sterling does better because it's a big project? Or is it because you can't really hear the MRT sound from the units? And does this MRT facing actually affect the performance of other unit types? And what about the layouts as well, right? Today in this video, we are going to discover a little bit more of these as we go on. Let's talk about the location first. For the name Penrith, right, I actually went online to search for what is this name. Falls under two places. So this being Queenstown, right, maybe Penrith got its name from this town in England. Just where is this Penrith? So let me just orientate you a little bit. This is the site that is of Penrith, and then Queenstown MRT is here. Over here we do have the 𝑭𝒊𝒓𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒓𝒆 Linear Park, and we got some schools nearby like Queenstown Primary School, we got 𝑭𝒊𝒓𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒓𝒆 Primary School, we've got 𝑭𝒊𝒏𝒈𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒓𝒆 Primary School and Newtown as well. And Queenstown is in an area where there are things that are actually quite interesting towards the west, east, north and south, which I will be talking about in a short moment. My colleagues in PropNex have actually done some research based on the walking distance to the train station. So you can see, as I mentioned just now, this is the site of Penrith. If you want to get like sheltered walking to the MRT station, right, you just have to go out this direction. There will be a gate that comes out this side, and then of course you cut through using the shelters along the road and onto the MRT station. All in all, it takes about 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The entrance for Penrith will be along Margaret Drive. So compared to the other condos like Commonwealth Tower and Queen's Peak, right, their main entrance is actually through the road here. And for Queen's Peak, you actually go in here and then go to Dundee Road. The daily driving home, right, when you're driving home, this road and this road here has a lot of difference when you drive past. So here is a very heavy road, and basically there are a lot of high rises around, so it feels very hectic. But I actually drive past here a lot because I have a listing nearby and I have to drive along this road quite frequently. So over along here, right, you will see that the landscaping here is slightly different in a sense that in front of these HDB projects, there's actually a lot of big trees around lining up along this path. And over this side also there's a lot of greens. So when you are driving along Margaret Drive, right, the feeling is a lot calmer and green compared to these areas here. You will start to feel slightly different as you are on your journey home, especially if you are driving, because the road here really makes you feel very calm and different as compared to if you were to drive along this area. But of course, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not sure whether how you feel. But if it's on a good weather and if you don't mind sweating, right, then there's another route to go to the train station. This is where Penrith is. And we're looking at the HDB blocks. This one will be Queen's Peak, and this one will be Commonwealth Tower. After coming out, right, you walk along this sheltered walkway along here, and then you cut through in between Queen's Peak and Commonwealth Tower. You should be able to get to Queenstown MRT in less than 4 minutes. This is the shortest walking route to Queenstown MRT station. As you can see, this is the train station, and there's a very good setback between the train station and Penrith itself. Developers of this project are Hong Leong Holdings and Guaco Land. I'm sure they are no strangers to Singapore's development scene, and the most recent launches that they have did was actually Springleaf Residence. So if you missed out on that video, you can actually have a look at my video again. And very likely for this project, they will also be introducing the customer loyalty program again. So you can refer to that video on how do we actually shortlist and go through the process, because at the point of time when you're given the loyalty queue, right, the most difficult decision is what to choose when you have so many choices. So we do have a framework of selecting units over there. Maybe you can catch our video at Springleaf Residences, or otherwise you can just contact us directly. We'll be able to guide you through this process smoothly. Just some disclaimers about whatever I'm going to say. So all these, you should still do your due diligence when it comes to purchasing your own property. Of course, all these that we're sharing over here are just for educational purposes. Here are some project details that we managed to get. And Penrith will be consisting of 2 blocks, which is at 70 and 72 Margaret Drive. And this is in District 3 in case you don't know. It will be housed in 2 towers of 40 stories, and total units is 462. In terms of the bedroom type, right, they are doing 2 to 4 bedrooms. Just take note that they are not building any 1 bedrooms here, and they are not building any 5 bedrooms here. So who are the target audience that they're trying to target? I have a rough idea, and later on let's discuss a bit more about that. The developers also have to build a early childhood development center here according to the URA land tender plans. And if I'm not wrong, at 500 square meters, it should be able to house about 100 children in terms of the daily operations, if that's what I remember correctly when I was reading through the URA land tender papers. Penrith will be one of the last few launches that is actually near to the MRT, with a site area of more than 100,000 and a plot ratio of 4.53. In terms of the car park, it will be basement 1 car park and 2 levels of multi-story. So when you add up these 3 together, you get a total of about 373 lots, which is pretty decent considering that it's actually close to the MRT station itself. And that is almost about 80% of the car park space allocated, which I find it very decent. Expected date of handover will be April 2029, and this is a project that is being designed by 𝑑𝒓𝒐𝒑𝒆𝒔𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒔, who are no strangers to the property scene in Singapore. They have done a lot of good projects, and landscape architect is actually 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝒀 Design. So the preliminary info that we have here is that the 2 bedrooms are 614 to 678 square feet, 3 bedrooms 786 to 1066 square feet, as well as the 4 bedrooms at 1173 to 1281 square feet. Looking at this, right, this is the map that I always like to do, and I've circled Penrith in the center. In terms of the working areas, the work nodes, the westwards of Penrith, this side, we do have the One North, NUS, NUH area. To the south, of course, we have Mapletree Logistics area, we have Alexandra Hospital, and to the east, right, east side will be CBD and SGH. So why is this important for us to know? Is because if I know that Penrith is in the middle of all these 3 work nodes, that means that in terms of the rentals, right, it's going to be a very good catchment area, because all these areas actually people need to work, and if let's say they are looking for a place to stay, then Penrith is actually in the middle of it all. Not only that, right, what I like about Queenstown in particular, and maybe also Redhill, is that we are very close to leisure areas. A couple of minutes drive can lead you over to Orchard Road, and in terms of the food and wine and dine, we are always very close to 𝑑𝒓𝒐𝒂𝒍𝒆, Holland Village, as well as the River Valley area. So this is a place where you not only can work, but you can also play. And lastly, at this location, we are also in the middle of many parks. So we have Botanic Gardens, 𝘀𝗽𝒄𝒄𝒄 Park, we have Hot Park, 𝑭𝒊𝒏𝒈𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒓𝒄𝒄 Park, 𝑑𝒓𝒐𝒑𝒊𝒆𝒔 Park, and then we have this 𝑭𝒊𝒏𝒈𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒓𝒄𝒄 Park. Recently, I'm very into parks, so I do encourage young people like myself to actually visit the parks. It's very nice, and I actually took some pictures recently, which I'll show you in the next slide. And also not forgetting, right, there's a low density area over here. So this area near to Orchard Boulevard, where 19 Nassim is, and near to the 𝑭𝒊𝒏𝒈𝒂𝒑𝒐𝒓𝒄𝒄 area, there's actually a lot of embassies around the area as well. So on to the next slide, right, these are the few pictures that I've taken in Botanic Gardens. When you're walking along there, the feeling is very good, because firstly, as I mentioned, there's no tall buildings around, right? So you can really take the time to appreciate nature, and you can actually look at the sky. So actually, the sky is very nice. It's just that a lot of us don't really stop and really just appreciate what we have. This is not the only one. Recently, I also visit Labrador Park as well. So if you're more into waters, or you want to hear the sound of the sea, then I recommend you going there. In Queenstown, we do have many schools as well in proximity. The nearest primary school being Queenstown Primary School. Of course, in proximity, we have Newtown, Gan Eng Seng, and Alexandra Primary. And all around, we also do have a lot of international schools nearby, and a lot of childcare nearby. I actually don't understand why, as part of the land tender, do they need to so-called have an early childhood development center. I guess this area have a lot of young parents, which is actually good in terms of, let's say, if you're buying Penrith for investment purposes, potentially these parents around here, they can be your future buyers next time. You can see here for yourself. This is from the URA papers, that Penrith is actually well served by its local amenities such as the library, the retail F&B options in Dawson Estate, meaning that you get hawker centers and food courts around as well as the existing schools and the park connector and the sports center. So this place is also well served not just by MRT, but also by bus services along Margaret Drive. Penrith itself will also have easy access to the city centre and other major destinations in Singapore, such as these stated here. To me, Queenstown, the name itself actually has some significance. The very first $1 million HDB flat, if you can see from the report from PropNext here, it is not Pinnacle at Duxton, and the first ever $1 million transacted in Singapore is actually in July 2012, which is more than 13 years ago. It is a executive apartment at Mei Ling Street, which is in Queenstown. If you don't really know, right, Queenstown is a place where there's many firsts. Queenstown is the first satellite town in Singapore, in a sense that it's self-contained. So with that, we have the first branched out library in Queenstown, we have the first polyclinic, we have the first sports complex, we also have the first IKEA in Singapore. What I like about this area also is that there's a lot of expensive HDBs. In Queenstown and nearby Bukit Merah, there has always been a lot of expensive HDBs around being transacted. So this means that should you wish to offload any of the condos here next time, it will be relatively easy to unload, because you know that you're selling to people who are actually coming with a lot of sales proceeds from the HDB flat. And when we're talking about the transactions in terms of the $1 million HDBs there, right, I've done up a table here in terms of the latest transactions being done. So what is the difference between Queenstown, Bukit Merah and other towns is that the number of expensive HDBs being transacted here is not just the MOP HDB flats. So for example, we can see, I've already done the color code here. Those HDBs that are 10 years and below, they're actually circled in green. Okay, so for example, in Ghim Moh Link, the HDBs here are about 8 years old, and those that are between 12 to 21 years old are circled in black, like 50 Strathmore Avenue, which is already 21 years, and the older HDB flats which are more than 25 years old, like the one in Mei Ling Street, and in this year coming is already in 33 years old. So you can see that there's many different kind of demand for $1 million HDB flats coming in the Queenstown area. We have more than 30 years old HDBs being transacted, we have 14 years old HDB being transacted, and we have also 10 years HDB being transacted. So there's many different people looking at different unit types around this area, which gives me comfort knowing that actually not just the new HDBs here are selling well, even the old ones are doing very good as well. So that to me shows a lot of demand for this kind of properties, even for HDB. So when these HDB owners exit, they have more financial power to actually buy the condos in the area as well. Not just for Queenstown. Okay, so Queenstown are the one circled in yellow. Over in Red Hill area, you can see as well, there's a good spread in terms of the age of the units being sold. So like for example, in Boon Tiong, we have units at 9 years old, and Kim Tian area, there's a variety in terms of the age of the HDB being transacted around here. Now we go to the land bid. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 and Hong Leong joint venture submitted a bid of 1154 per square foot per plot ratio for this land. There's a second bidder coming in by Sing Holdings. The winning bid from 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 Hong Leong is only about 5% higher than the second bidder. So again, similar to Sky on Holland, I do feel that this land price is priced correctly. And in turn, that means that, when they sell to the consumer, you will have comfort knowing that they did not overbid for the land, so they did not have to so-called sell you at a much higher price just because the land bid price is high. If I were to base on the pricing, right, so right now the official prices are not out yet, and I'm just trying to think about, how will they launch their pricing? So to me, there are two schools of thoughts. Okay, firstly, because Penrith is very close to town already, so you will have one school of thought whereby, should I peg my pricing closer to River Green, or should I peg it closer to what they have launched recently? And then I mark down the pricing for that. So these are two schools of thoughts. Firstly, we have River Green, which have bidded the land for 1325 PSF PPR, and that's a price difference of about $170 in terms of the price difference for their land bid. But when River Green launched, the pricing was about 2850 to 3350 per square foot per plot ratio. And then for Springleaf Residences, it's a lot further away from town, but it's from the same developer. So in terms of the land cost, there's about $250 difference in terms of the land bid price. And when they launched, it was a very, very good deal for the consumers in the sense that they launched around $2,060 to 2330 per square foot per plot ratio. So if I were to do the markup for Springleaf versus Penrith, then potentially the pricing could be 2309 to 2579. But there's a disparity here between the first school of thought and the second school of thought. So for the first school of thought for River Green, okay, if we were to mark it up with River Green, then I can see the pricing to be about 2680 to 3182. So in my mind, right, how should I decide between these two? There are a few factors in mind. Firstly is that in terms of the land size, in terms of the way the height is, I think that River Green is a lot more closer in terms of this to Penrith. Why? Because River Green is 36 stories, while Penrith is 40 stories. Even though River Green only has one block, but the unit count is much closer to Penrith itself. And if I compare it with Springleaf, right, there's a lot more differences with Springleaf and Penrith compared to River Green versus Penrith. So in my mind, right, I think that I want to give a higher weightage in terms of the price prediction towards River Green side. So starting price, if I were to follow according to the calculations using Springleaf, then 2003 doesn't really seem so plausible. Reason being because in other areas, like for example, further away from town, they have already launched at about 2004. So I believe it will be higher than that, and I will give more weightage in terms of the pricing towards River Green. So what I did was actually, I take the price gap between 2680 and 2309. So the price difference of about $380, I divide by 3 and I times 2. So when I do this ratio in terms of 2:1, right, that means I divide by 3 and times 2, that will give me a starting price of about 2560. And when it comes to the top price that's going to be selling there in terms of the top floor for the height of Penrith at 40 stories, then I do expect the pricing to be closer to River Green. Because as you can see, those in the RCR area, especially like Ori, the pricing are already very close to 3000, 3001. So it cannot be that the top floor pricing for Penrith be so low. That's why I've given an even higher weightage in a sense that it will follow more towards River Green. So same thing, I take the price difference of 3182 minus 2579, I divide by 10, I times 8. So that gives me a price of 3060. So bear in mind, all these are just my own calculations, it's estimate, but it's not the official prices, so please don't quote me based on the price. But the reason why I'm doing this is actually to calculate, because we have the sizes here already, so based on this PSF, right, what are the pricings that potentially might be released? Because this information might be crucial in you choosing between this project and another project. Okay, so let's move on. In terms of the Queenstown area, there are no new launches for the past couple of years. So Penrith will be the first launch in the area that is actually harmonized. And in fact, it will be the last land plot that is near the MRT station. So when we compare the layouts later, right, we have to bear in mind that the 3 to 4 projects that we're going to discuss later, they are actually non-harmonized. So when I bring Penrith in, the size will naturally be slightly smaller. So we have to do a bit of discount in terms of the sizing when we're evaluating the older projects, when we're doing a comparison later on. Okay, I added in another disclaimer here again. Just take note that this video is purely just for educational purposes again. And if you do wish to make any decisions, important decisions, please do consult a professional, and ideally maybe you want to reach out to us to help you with this home buying selection process as well. I'm going to be zooming in more about these projects that are in the Queenstown area. Based on the land size, I'm going to focus more for Margaret View, Commonwealth Tower and Queen's Peak, because the land size are more similar and the unit count is actually more similar as well. So based on the preliminary info that we have, Penrith land size of 9005, is actually very comparable to what we have over in Queen's Peak and in Commonwealth Towers as well. So Margaret View is really a smaller land plot, almost by half. But when we see the unit count for Margaret View at 309 units, right? The unit count is actually a lot compared to the land size. The reason why I have put in the number of blocks and number of units together with the number of stories, right, is to calculate the density in terms of the per floor level. So I give you an example, right? Commonwealth Towers, 2 blocks of 845 units. That means that if I were to split the block equally, right, one block should have about 422 units. So the units from Commonwealth Towers start from 4th floor to 40th floor. If I take 422 divide by 40, then actually per level for each block there's going to be about 10 units. So that's going to make it very, very packed. And when we apply the same calculation for Queen's Peak, 368 units per block, and it being 36 stories, right? So average per unit per level is going to be about 10.2. But when we come to Penrith, I'm trying to do an estimate in terms of the number of units per level. So we have 2 blocks of 462 units. So one block will be 231 units, assuming that they both split same number of units per block. In terms of the levels, right, they will have 2 levels of multi-story car park. Level 2 and level 3 will be the multi-story. Very likely 4th floor will be the facilities. So the first unit might potentially start from the 5th floor all the way up to 40 floors. That means that there's total of 35 floors in terms of their residential. So when I take 231 divide by 35, it means that per level I only have 6.6 units. So in terms of the density per level, right, it's actually much lesser compared to Commonwealth Tower, Queen's Peak, and Margaret View itself. So when Penrith is built up, right, all these things will actually add up in terms of the feeling when you drive in from Margaret Drive, you know, it's a quiet road, and you go up to the unit, per level is only 6 units to 7 units. That feeling of being less packed, less dense, you will not feel it as strong as compared to, let's say, compared to Margaret View, Commonwealth Tower, and Queen's Peak. And it's very, very important because this will separate Penrith in terms of the feeling you get when you go for viewings compared to these 3 other condos itself. So I'm just trying to do some educated guess here. We have 2 blocks of 40 stories, right? And then we have multi-story car parks of level 2, level 3. So very high chance that level 4 will be the facilities in terms of the pool. And if I'm the developer, let's say if I split the blocks and I have equal units, right? So both will be up to level 40. And only one side will be facing towards the GCB areas, right? So potentially, let's say if the blocks is like that, okay, then only one side here will get the full frontage in terms of the view. So based on this, we also know that per level is going to be about 6 to 7 units. So it depends really on how I want to structure the block in terms of the layout for me to maximize the views. Or another way they can do is to make one block 40 stories and one block slightly shorter so that they can maximize the views. But all in all this is really just guesswork. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. Potentially, there's another way they can build as well in terms of being similar to Queen's Peak. So what Queen's Peak have done is that up until a certain floor level, they only have the 1 bedroom until the small 3 bedroom. So they have 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and a small 3 bedrooms. And then on the higher floors, they build the bigger units. And that's something similar to Promenade Peak as well. Honestly, I don't know how they're going to do it. So this is just some discussion and food for thought. We have already known that what is the size range is going to be. As mentioned just now, 2 bedrooms, 614 to 678 square feet. 3 bedrooms, 786 to 1066 square feet. And 4 bedrooms, 1173 to 1281 square feet. Based on the developers' past projects, right, we have seen for Springleaf Residence 2-bed 1-bath is 527 square feet, 2-bed 2-bath to be 646, 678, 689 square feet. So I feel that this 614 square feet is a mystery because the 2-bed 1-bath they've done for Springleaf is only 527 square feet. So are they going to build a big 614 square feet 2-bed 1-bath, or are they going to create a new category of 2-bed 2-bath for 614? You know, that's up for discussions. So we've already seen from Springleaf itself that they've already created a new version of the 3-bed 2-bath at 786 square feet, which I'll show in a bit. In terms of the 4-bedroom size, it's going to be very competitive because the sizing is coming at 1173 square feet, which is actually not too big, and that can help to keep the content really affordable compared to the other resale condos there. As mentioned just now, the 786 square feet to me is really a trendsetter in terms of the layout. They managed to do a 3-bed 2-bath doing this. So previously for Guaco Land, they have done this layout for Lentor Mansion and Springleaf. So will they apply this layout again back into Penrith itself? I really don't know. And for 818 square feet, they actually managed to do at the corner unit whereby you get windows for all the bathrooms and kitchens as well. So this is a very efficient layout, which I'm not sure whether they'll put it inside Penrith as well. Just now I was talking about this 614 square feet, right? So to me, it's really a mystery whether they will build a very big 2-bed 1-bath or will they create a new category of 2-bed 2-bath. So in my head, right, using this 527 square feet from Lentor Mansion and Springleaf, let's say if I were to create a 2-bed 2-bath, if there's not enough space to create one more bathroom, maybe, you know, they can do one more powder room here. So instead of having 2 bathrooms, you have 1 powder room and 1 bathroom, which may be useful to certain people, and I'm not sure how they're going to do it or whether they're going to do it or not, but all these are just speculation talk. Maybe they could do a 614 square feet that is of a 2-bed 1-bath but with 1 storeroom. I'm really not sure how it's going to come out. And 678 square feet they've also done before. In a sense, for Lentor Central, they have actually done a 2-bed 2-bath together with a tuck-in kitchen. So whether or not this comes out in Penrith, I'm not sure, but I do hope that they have layouts like that because we want to compete with the other layouts that are currently existing for the resale projects in the Queenstown area already. Based on the pricings that we have just now, as we mentioned, the calculation 2560 to 3060, I just do a very simple markup to 2006 to 3001. So based on the floor levels, we have 1 to 40 stories. If you are looking at the lower floors, potentially this could be the pricing. It's not the actual pricing, but potentially it could be, and as well as for the mid floor and high floor. So you can see the sizes here, 2 bedroom, 614, 678 square feet. I'm not sure whether they're going to slot any more units in the middle in terms of the size. Maybe they will. And 3 bedroom, the range is 786 to 1068 square feet. So I'm just using a guess that maybe they may be using back the layouts from Springleaf at 818 and 904 square feet. And I've also inserted the prices of these units as well, just for calculation purposes. Not forgetting we do have the 4 bedrooms at 1173 and 1281 square feet. So all in all, when we multiply by the per square foot, these are the prices that potentially can come out. Okay, and I'm just going to go through very quickly about the layouts that we have in the area in terms of the competitor. So we have Margaret View, Queen's Peak and Sterling Residences, because Commonwealth Tower does not have any 2-bed 2-bath. In terms of the rental, right, they're all very similar. So what I find over here is that in terms of for 2-bed 1-bath, right, the highest rental here actually belongs to the unit that is actually closest to the MRT. We can see over here, right, the layout may not be the best in the sense that they don't really have a squarish balcony, and that means that it's very, very difficult to do zip track to enclose. And of course, when we look over here at bedroom 2, right, it's also not the biggest. So tenants that are looking here for 2-bed 1-bath, maybe to them, the location is the most important here rather than the layout. But when it comes to selling, right, it's a different story because the other two projects in terms of the selling price can be higher even though they are further away from the train station. So my question here is, does facing the MRT track make a difference for the projects here or not? Because Queen's Peak, Commonwealth Tower and Margaret Drive, they're all along the MRT track, but Penrith and Sterling Residences is not. Okay, I've done some investigation in the form of finding units that are facing directly the MRT itself. So stack 12, stack 25 directly facing MRT, and we have stack 6 and stack 18, which is a 2-bed 1-bath as well, that is not facing the train station. So when it comes to the resale transactions, those being transacted recently, as we can see here, 0925, which is facing the MRT track, and 0906, that is not facing the MRT track. So they were transacted actually very, very close together, and I purposely try to find units that are of the similar floor range so that the PSF will be more accurate. And over another time, for 23rd floor and 24th floor, you can see that actually the price difference between the MRT facing and the non-MRT facing for 2-bed 1-bath, there is actually not much difference there. So what it means here is that most likely the 2-bed 1-bath here are not for own stay. That's why in terms of the facing, people actually don't really care whether it faces the MRT track or not. And when we go on to the 2-bed 2-bath, the balance between the distance to MRT and the layout is very, very important. So why do I say so? For example, right, the highest rent here, Sterling Residences, 4,711 compared to the rest in terms of the average rent. The rent is the highest because the layout is, honestly in my opinion, is the best among all these other condos here. Why? Because we got tuck-in kitchen over here, which the other units do not have. And another thing that I learned here is that it cannot be too far away from the MRT. Otherwise, for the 2-bed 2-bath, your rent will be slightly lower compared to those that are near to MRT. So you see Margaret View over here, even though they have a good sized unit over here, but the rental rates, actually those near to MRT are better. But you can see over here, layout is the most important because in terms of the rental, this is actually the highest commanded in this area, even though they have almost 200 units over there. So you can see here the rents are very, very strong, even though the supply over here is quite high. And in terms of the selling price, right, maybe layout and having no MRT sound may be more important compared to maybe near MRT but have MRT sound. Why? Because you can see here, the unit size for Sterling is actually smaller, but the transacted in terms of the accepted range in the resale market for the past 1 year, actually they've commanded the highest price points here. Okay, I've used Queen's Peak again because they have the most consistent layout and the facing. So that means that we do have the same layout for the two different facings. So over here we have stack 8 and stack 20, which is facing the MRT track, and we have stack 1 and stack 14 that is not facing the MRT track for the 2-bed 2-bath itself. And when it comes to the resale market in terms of the prices accepted here, we can see that there is a difference in the pricing. The units facing MRT are actually highlighted in brown, and the non-facing MRT units are actually in blue. So it has consistently seen that those that are not facing the MRT, they actually commanded a higher per square foot compared to the one facing the train track. That means people are actually willing to pay more to be not noisy. Okay, so in case you're wondering, hey, maybe this one is 15th floor, naturally the per square foot will be higher than the lower floor. So I've actually took out other data whereby we get a lower floor quiet facing versus a higher floor MRT facing. We can still see that the per square foot transacted here is still higher than the higher floor track facing. So this goes to show that when it comes to the 2-bed 2-bath onwards, people actually prefer quieter. And let's say when we are comparing this with Penrith, then there should be a price gap as well, because Penrith, I'm very sure that we will not hear the MRT sound, as much as if you were directly in front of the MRT track. So there's a different pricing gap in terms of if you're facing the train track and you're not. So over here you can see even for the same project itself, with such a layout that is not so good in terms of having such a big balcony, no tuck-in kitchen, and having a bedroom small. Even for things like this, there's already a price difference for the same layout for the different facings, and it can go from 4 to 6%. So when we are doing calculations, right, when we do the second part video series, maybe I'll factor all these calculation in terms of the different facing of the train track and non-train track facing. We'll use this to compare with Penrith. That's why it's important for us to discover, is it really important that, does the MRT sound make a difference? So we can see here 2-bed 2-bath, yes. 2-bed 1-bath, no. So 2-bed 1-bath is purely investment in my point of view, and 2-bed 2-bath, potentially people may want to consider for own stay. That's why they are very concerned about the sound here. And I'm very sure this will apply for the 3 and 4 bedrooms as well, which we'll discuss more in another part 2 video of Penrith. Okay, so let me just continue. Just go through the other layouts that we have over here. 2-bed plus study over here, we have Margaret View and Sterling Residences. You can see that a lot of them, they have very, very big balconies that even extend up to the study, as well as the one for Sterling Residences. The balcony is also leading up to the master bedroom. Why people will rent these units is because for this amount of rent, they do not have to pay close to $6,000 for 3 bedrooms. So early on, just now remember that 2-bed 2-bath, people actually pay more for the quieter facing. Potentially these people could be looking for own stay. And for 2 plus study, right, let's say if they really don't need a 3 bedrooms, then this is something that they are actually considering, because they don't have to pay so high in terms of the rent, let's say if they're looking to stay in this area. So I just want to come back to the estimated pricing that we have over here, because this pricing is very important for us to so-called compare with the existing resale. Let's not forget that all these condos here have already some age. So by the time Penrith TOPs in maybe 2029 or 2030, all these condos are already much older. So if we can get a similar pricing or pay a slightly higher pricing but not too high pricing compared to these condos, right, then really you should consider Penrith if you really want to stay in this area, because the pricing will make sense. That's why just now I was thinking whether this 614 square feet, is it a 2-bed 2-bath or 2-bed 1-bath? Because if this is going to be a 2-bed 1-bath, then you can see based on the pricings here and based on the prices that are transacted previously, right? Okay, we see over here at this kind of pricing, 1.3, 1.4. If the 2-bed 1-bath for Penrith is going to be this pricing, then is it very expensive or not? Honestly, I think that it's going to be quite expensive. That's why I want to see whether this is a 2-bed 1-bath or a 2-bed 2-bath. And the same goes for the different unit types over here. So until the layout, the final layout is out, can we have a firm decision on whether, for Penrith, what are the unit types that I can consider here? So stay tuned to the second part of our video where we're going to explain a bit more. Now let me just run out by showing you the rest of the layouts here for the 3-bed 2-bath, 3-bed 3-bath, and the 4-bed rooms, and then we'll call it a day. And then stay tuned to our next video where we're going to be talking a lot more in depth in terms of the price analysis. So just the 3-bed 2-bath. As you can see here, right, the distance to the MRT really plays a part in terms of the rental for 3-bed 2-bath. Margaret View here, even though the layout is quite nice, but the rental is still not as high as compared to the rest, because Margaret View to walk to MRT is really quite far. And you can see, right, in terms of the rental, right, Queen's Peak, the rent is actually quite high as well, even though the layout is one of the worst among compared to the other 3, because same thing again, you don't get good sized bedrooms and you don't even have enclosed kitchens. And they also have 180 units. Despite that, the rent is still higher compared to Margaret View where the layout is better. So for rental, you can see that for 3-bed 2-bath, the distance to train station is really important. So Sterling Residence, within walking distance to MRT, the rentals are also quite comparable as well. But the layout itself will affect the selling price. So you can see that for the Queen's Peak layout, because it's not so good, right, the demand in terms of the selling and buying, the prices here can be actually lower than Margaret View, which is further away from MRT. Okay, so when it comes to Penrith, we have to be very careful about the layout. Paying a bit more is okay, because it will be the newest among all these when it TOPs. And you can see from the older projects here, basically the balconies, they can be very, very big, some even very irregular. So this could give an advantage to Penrith in terms of the layout. And Sterling, right, despite having one of the smaller sizes around here for the 3-bed 2-bath, it is actually commanded the highest price in terms of the resale transactions here. For Margaret View, the size is big, price is high, people are willing to pay. So layout is very important here as well. There's a lot of good competition here in terms of the 3-bed 3-bath. And I've included one 3-bed 2-bath plus store here for Sterling Residences as well in terms of the competition. And what I noticed over here is that layout is still the most important factor when it comes to the selling of the 3-bed 3-bath over here. Commonwealth Tower, they have the highest selling price among the 3, as the layout is very good. What I like about here is that, even for the common bedrooms, you do have ensuite access to the toilets. That means I do not have to step out of my room to access the bathroom. So this is something that I really like for this layout at Commonwealth Towers. And what I can see from here is that price is not a big issue, because bigger size, higher price, people are still willing to pay. It goes to show that there's actually demand for good layouts around here. And I feel that for Penrith, right, they are quite daring to put in a 1066 square feet as their largest 3-bedroom size. Because don't forget, 1066 is already harmonized. So if I compare with those that are non-harmonized over here, right, 1066 If I unharmonize it and if I add 7%, right, potentially it could be about 1104 square feet, which is the largest among these few. So it takes a lot of guts to actually create this kind of layout when we're coming to compete with the 3-bed 3-baths around here. But I can understand why after looking at this. Basically, if the layout is good, if the size is big, people are still willing to pay. And also for the 4-bedroom, for super big size and nice layout that we have over here, like Queen's Peak at 1,005, Sterling at almost 1,004 square feet, if the layout is nice, you get a private lift, you get a nice living dining area and family area, things like that, right? Okay, that kind of size, people are willing to pay above 3.2 million if the layout is good. For Penrith, the only thing we have to take note is that the biggest 3-bedroom is at 1,066 square feet, while the 4 bedrooms is at 1,173 square feet. So we have to take note of the differences of the biggest 3-bedroom in Penrith and the smallest 4-bedroom in Penrith in terms of the layout and the pricing. Okay, and later on when we analyze further on in our second part series for 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms, right, besides the efficiency of space, we also have to talk a lot about the feeling that we get when we step inside the house in terms of the frontage of the living room and the rim size. So even though for Penrith they have 1,173 square feet, it ranges up to 1,281 square feet. I will not be surprised if this 1,281 square feet sells well as well. Not just in terms of the new sale market, but in the resale market, it could be very accepted as well. So all these we will discuss further on once the floor plans are released. So I'll leave it to the next chapter. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions with regards to Penrith, Sky on Holland, and in fact there are 3 other launches upcoming in the next couple of weeks. We have the Sand, which is in Upper Bukit Timah, and then we have Faber Residences in Clementi, and last one we have Zion Grand as well. If you are not sure on how should you compare these 5 projects, do feel free to look for us. We will be able to give you a very clear answer. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!